All right, I've got a new Bible study for you today. This is a really interesting one. I've touched on this in a few times in my old past videos on this channel. And I just want to show a few verses, more and more to show the proof, how Matthew 24 is talking about the Jews. It's if we rightly divide our Bibles, as the Bible tells us to, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, the rightly divided word of truth. And this is what we're going to do. I'm going to do a few verses through Matthew 24 and show how it lines up talking about tribulation. Jesus is talking about the Jews in tribulation. In the book of Revelation, I'm going to show you a few verses that line right up with that. It's just great to give you like a little bit of an opening to where you could start doing studies on your own of Matthew 24 and stuff. Just really interesting how it works. And when you rightly divide Matthew 24, it just Jesus really opens up the Bible to not only the Jews but the Gentiles, us as well, about future events. It's quite amazing. Now, I always want to keep everybody in context, of course, because we have to have the Bible in context, know who's speaking, know who's speaking, what they're speaking about, and who they're speaking to. Now, let's go ahead and read the first few verses of Matthew 24. 24 verse 1, it says, "And Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple." Of course, the temple, he's talking about the temple and that was in Jerusalem, the temple of King Solomon. That temple will return in tribulation, or even just before. I'm not sure when the temple will actually be rebuilt, before or after tribulation. I'm not sure. But it will actually, not after tribulation, but before or just after the rapture is what I mean to say. But the same temple will also be there throughout the entire reign of the 1,000-year millennium of Christ. And then it will be destroyed when heaven and earth is destroyed. And there'll be a new heaven, new earth, and a new temple, which is the temple, actually not new temple, it's the temple that's in heaven. Now, and it will come down. But that's for another Bible study. Okay, now let's go ahead and read verse 2, and it says, "And Jesus said to them, See ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another, and shall not be thrown down. That shall not be thrown down. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, his disciples came unto him privately, saying, Tell us when these things shall be, and what shall be the sign of thy coming, and the end of the world." Now here's the questions. First, the disciples asked Jesus, "Tell us when shall these things be?" What things? The temple. When Jesus said, "See not of these things, verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down." He's talking about the buildings of the temple. And the first question was, first the disciples asked Jesus, "Tell us when shall these things be?" When shall the temple be destroyed is what they're asking Jesus. And what shall be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? The sign of thy coming and the end of the world. They had three questions to ask Jesus, and Jesus is spending an entire chapter plus, and more than a chapter, answering these questions. So, as we see in context of the questions, when shall these things be? When shall the temple be destroyed? Because in that time, the temple was still there until 70 AD. Of course, from 70 AD on, so far, it's not been rebuilt yet. And it says, "And what shall be the sign of thy coming?" What's the signs of your return, Jesus? "And the end of the world," which is Armageddon. Now, we can see through here, and I've done more extensive studies, but I actually have my other Bible here, and I'm just going to pull notes from that out of Matthew 24. And it's saying here, I'm just wanting to show you how all this stuff really lines up with tribulation and how Jesus is telling Jews about tribulation. Jesus isn't speaking about the rapture. He's speaking about after the rapture. Let's see if I can get this here. Go ahead and move. I got two Bibles sitting here, so I'm going to have to go ahead and use one book and one in another here. So we're going to go to, let's stick around Revelation chapter 8 through 12. And let's read here. We'll kind of skip around a little bit in Matthew 24. In Matthew 24, verse 16, it says, "Then let them which are in Judea flee into the mountains." Okay. Who's them in Judea? The Jews. The Jews, he's telling them to flee into the mountains. Now, if we look at Revelation 12:15, it's talking about how the Jews are going to be leaving, are going to be fleeing. it says in 12:15, it says, the serpent cast out his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cast her to be carried away of the flood. Now, the woman in this context is Jerusalem. Is Israel. In Jerusalem at the time, but the woman is actually Israel. And if you go down to chapter 21 of Matthew, for then shall be great tribulation, such as was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. In 22, and except these days shall be shortened, there should not no flesh be saved, but for the elect's sake these days shall be shortened. Now, if we look at Revelation 8:12, in Revelation, in tribulation, we see that these days will be shortened. Look at Revelation 8:12. It says, and the four angels sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars. So as the third part of them are darkened, and the day shone not of a third part of it, and the night likewise. It's talking about how days will be shortened in tribulation. And Jesus also said it will be shortened. Of course, he's talking about tribulation. And it's let me scoot down to right here. It says in verse 29 of Matthew 24, immediately after tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from the heavens, and the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. And again, I'm going to read, with that context of that verse, I'm going to read 12 again. And the four angels sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and third part of the moon, and there in the third part of the stars. It's talking about the stars again here. It's talking about it was in the moon shall not give her light, and the third part of the moon, and the stars, a third part of the stars. And it's saying, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. And the third part of them were darkened, and the day shone not for a third of it, and the night likewise. So you get a third of the day and a third of the night. So the days are literally shortened, as Jesus said, and also as it says in Revelation chapter 8. If you see this, and it says in chapter 30, verse 31 of Matthew 24, and he shall send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of the earth to the other. Let's look at Revelation 8:2. And I saw 7 angels which stood before God, and to them were given 7 trumpets. And the angels came and stood at the altar, having the golden scepter, and there was given unto him much incense, and he should offer it with the prayer of the saints upon the golden altar, which was before the throne. Let's see here. Exactly, let's see. And if you see here in verse 36, you see in Matthew 24:36, but of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but only my Father. Jesus is talking about only God the Father can know. But it's also interesting because if we would just jump over to Peter, 1 Peter 1:12, and Peter talks about angels and what they were thinking when they were in heaven. It's really amazing. 1 Peter 1:12 says, unto whom it was revealed that not that unto themselves, but also us, as they did minister to things which are now reported unto you by them that have preached the gospel unto you with the Holy Ghost sent down from heaven, which things the angels desired to look unto. And it's showing, Peter's saying how angels were in heaven looking down at Jesus like, what's he doing? What's going on? And they didn't know. They just desired to know. And it was not revealed to them, and only as it was happening. As it was unfolding, the angels were learning as well. It's very interesting. Let's see here. And another thing that's really interesting here. Look in, let's see. Let's start in Matthew 24:40. I'm going to read down a little bit. And it's really interesting here. It says in 40, then shall 2 be in the field, one shall be taken and the other left. 2 women shall be grinding in the mill, and one shall be taken and the other left. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord did come. Now, people get confused thinking, well, that's talking about the rapture. Actually, it isn't. The rapture is not. Jesus is talking about this. The rapture would have already happened. This is actually the separation of the sheep and the goats and stuff like that. So, talking about how after God returns, he's going to take one and leave one. And it's talking about how if you were actually taken at that time, that's not good. If you're taken to the rapture, that's great, and that's what you want. But if you're actually in the context of Matthew 24, 40 on, if you're taken in this context, it's bad because it means that you were one of the goats that were thrown into hell, that was left behind onto the earth is good at that point. Because it's not talking about the rapture. This is talking about the end of Armageddon when God will separate the sheep from the goats. It's very interesting. And it's just really amazing how Matthew lines up. A lot of people read Matthew 24 and they really don't think much of it. But Matthew 24 lines up with Revelation. It's really interesting because as long as you know what your context is, because Jesus is answering questions that the Jews gave him. He gave them some questions, and Jesus is simply answering their questions, as I showed in the beginning of the video. So it's really amazing how that works. But we have to rightly divide. Now, if we go, as I mentioned before, in 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 15, 2 Timothy 2:15, says, study to show thyself approved unto God, a workman that needed not be ashamed, rightly divided the work of truth. Of course, you won't be ashamed if you know your Bible. It's pretty amazing. It says to study, to show yourself approved, study your scriptures every single day. And I find it interesting how all that lines up. But we have to rightly divide our Bibles. We have to see what part of the Bible it's talking to us, what part of the Bible it's talking to the Jews, in different times in this and that, because we have to know that our gospel is a specific gospel today. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 1 through 4. Because in Romans chapter 11, verse 13, we see, let me go to it and just read it straight out for you. 11:13 shows us, right here, and our apostle says, for I speak unto you Gentiles, inasmuch as I am the apostle to the Gentiles, and I magnify mine office. He's the apostle to the Gentiles. So he's the one that we should be listening to. From the books of Romans through Philemon are our books that we are to take literal today. And stuff. That's our doctrine today. Of course, I truly believe completely in the pre-tribulation rapture because the Bible teaches it to be factual. So all the things, if you're saved through the blood of Christ, the death, burial, and resurrection by no works, then you would actually leave the rapture. However, if you die before the rapture, you just go to heaven anyway. But after that is then when tribulation begins. Because as soon as tribulation starts, the rapture happens around the time of tribulation. So it's almost like a simultaneous thing. The rapture, boom, then the tribulation starts. So it's really interesting. But I want to show that a little bit on a quick video.